Welcome to The Analyte, the show where we dive deep into the science, strategy, and stories behind industrial hygiene safety and the people who are reshaping how we think about exposure, risk, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Christensen, and today we're joined by somebody who's you've probably heard on or seen on LinkedIn, Cedrick Moriggi. Cedrick is known for his insightful takes on leadership, managing risk, and the real-world challenges facing professionals in EHS and beyond. His posts don't just get engagement, they start conversations. In an era where authenticity is rare and expertise is often hidden behind buzzwords, from his military beginnings to his corporate and academic career, Cedrick stands out as someone who actually walks the walk. Today we're going to unpack what drives his perspectives, from how he built his professional views on leadership, learning, and the next generation of risk professionals. So grab your coffee and some fine Swiss chocolate, and let's get to it. Cedrick, thanks for coming on The Analyte. It's great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for inviting me. I'm actually smiling because I've never heard such a nice intro. I should take it and make it my own bio. Thank you for that.
Yeah, the power of AI, right?
Yeah.
Give me a nice podcast intro to Cedrick Moriggi and read his LinkedIn bio.
Well done. Well done.
I did do some edits, so there's some human touches in there. The Swiss chocolate was my idea. And just for the audience's insight, you are based in Switzerland, and that's where we met, both working for Holcim, world leader in in building materials, on the cement side mostly. And we had quite the time working together during the COVID pandemic. And so it's great to reconnect with you and have this opportunity to talk about what you're doing now.
Thank
Can you tell us?
If I may just add one thing, I think your the COVID journey we went through together, right, that started in January 2020, was also an highlight of our professional career in relation of how do we build bridges in between function. Because naturally, you being HSC lead and me being the head of the security and resilience function at the time, unless an incident would happen, we would never really have collaborated together. And it just happened that COVID has just somehow obliged us with a lot of satisfaction towards the end to work together. Because we had to learn from each other's world, and we realized that one without another was absolutely kind of useless against that massive pandemic. So I think on my behalf and my team behalf at the time, I remember the very long nights and the very long evening we were working together remotely. And just for that, I wanted to extend my heartfelt thank you to you, because it was absolutely amazing experience.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a great learning experience. And, I was very honored to be in such a, we had a diverse group, right? We had ops, we had HR, we had
13 function. We had 13 function that were reporting into the stream. If you remember, Jan, the CEO at the time, decided to divide the company in three. One was health, cash, and cost. And he turned around and he said, Cedrick, can you look after the health? And it wasn't health as health and safety. It was health of the company and health of the people of the company. And we had everything from operation. We had the three mainstream of operation, the one that had to make the money while we were that we as head of function were still spending. And then we had all the function reps, starting from HSC, with Jeff at the time, who was your former boss, and all the other function, from compliance to media to to external affair, internal affair, media. So it was fascinating. It was HR. Should not forget HR. We had some, if you remember, we had some very intense argument with HR, but that were all positive.
Procurement too. Procurement supply was involved. Yeah,
procurement. We had energy. We had logistic. If you remember. We had 13 functions, 13 head of function like you, which were all joining 3 or 4 times a week. And then remember, we had the Help Me Out, Hear Me Out session.
Yeah, I forgot what that was called, but I remember that now, yeah.
That was brilliant. We started to have, and that's something you might have never heard, we had anything from 30 to 1,000 people attending the session at some point. And before I left Holcim, I ended up by going in Colombia. And I met someone in the street near our operation, and they came to me and said, "We know you, we know you." I said, "How do you know me?" And they said, "Well, we've seen you on the Help Me Out session, an
Right.
HMO, we used to call them." And I was, "What do you mean?" And I realized that our operation over there, we're using those sessions to then push them to their churches, their schools, and to their kids who would keep learning their English by listening to us. Can you believe it? I mean, that was extraordinary. So we had you and Richard Fitzhugh, the BBC voice of Waltham, and no, it was. I think we left a very strong impact on the ground, much stronger than what we thought. And yeah, the TARP all the time. You had to create those TARP, the trigger action response planning, etc. So it was a beautiful experience that we had to manage, right? So, thank you.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was my introduction to you was I had just finished a tour of the U.S. and Mexico sites, and I had actually gotten the flu. And while I was here in the States before I came back from the holidays and finished that tour, I jumped on a call, and that was the first time I'd met you and Richard and a lot of the other team, and we were talking about this respiratory illness that was coming out of China and that we should keep our eye on, and that was how the whole ball got rolling for me. So,
And that was the third. We had the first information on the 3rd of January. That's what we call the 3rd of January moment. And if you remember, on February the 14th, we were ready with the plan, and we
yep,
were ready to roll out. And by the 1st of March, we had rolled it out with the mountain analogy. If you remember, climbing up the mountain, we don't know what was on the top, how long the top will be away from, etc., etc. People were taking us absolutely crazy. They thought that we were nuts. And
yeah,
well, unfortunately, we were right. But most importantly, then they followed us and they trust us, and all of a sudden, the entire machine got completely inverted, and the country took the lead brilliantly. And we're just a coordinator of the different information flying from the country, etc. That was absolutely an highlight of academic and psychological highlight of I think of our career, where we've learned a lot from the ground.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah, that was good, and it's really
yeah.
nice to reconnect with you.
It's great to reconnect with you. I'm all smiles just thinking about all those times. As tragic as it was as a global pandemic, and it's not something that you look forward to, but just thinking about all that great collaboration and all those great meetings, and and quite honestly, for someone like myself who gets bored easily, every day was literally a new
Yeah,
day. Nothing was the same. You know.
I think we also need to remember giving credit to our fearful leader at the time, Jan Jenisch, who just decided to divide the company in three. But most importantly, I remember having a call with him vividly, where I said, "Jan, we need to do this." I said, "Cedrick, the first thing we do is we look after our people. We do look after our people." He said, "We're not going to fire anyone. We're not going to get anyone dying on our watch. Over to you. Make it happen." And I was, "Yeah, but what about the supplier? We need to help them," because he said, "Cedrick, the people first, our people first." And if you remember at the time, we had 75,000 staff plus 72,000 contractors, and
Yep.
included the contractors into the workforces. So we created a program for the 140 odd thousand workforces that actually allowed us to have our salary. And I think Jan on that one has been spot on. He said, you will not let down anyone. Over to you." Remember, we had India, we had to fly in oxygen mask and gas and to help our employees. We had places we had to send jabs and flu jabs and COVID jabs and then medicine. So it was, I think, yeah, it funny enough or unfunny enough, but strangely enough, it just went like this for me. We just
Yeah.
were busy 24/7. So anyway,
Well, and as we
kind of,
as we were catching up, it was like, how long ago was this? Was this
yeah,
2022? Like, wow, that's been three
yeah.
years already.
A lot of people have suffered, but I think, and I'm going to conclude on that because otherwise I can start to talk about that experience for ages. But when we
Yeah,
received the note from the union thanking us for what you guys from an HSE point of view and us as a global resilience function did, stating that actually it was safer for them to come in the office than to stay at home. That was the highlight. We haven't had one strike. And we haven't killed anyone. No one got COVID while they were operating on our side. I remember you investigating every single of
every
the
single one.
potential COVID transmission, and not once have they caught COVID while they were on the operation. They always brought it from outside, Remember, we had that sanctuary model that we created. So I think there's a lot to, from a resilience point of view, that the company has learned, which is what you want to talk today.
Yeah, let's pivot to resilience. You've really broken some ground in resilience, and you argue that it's a strategic investment, that companies can see great returns as far as investing in their preparedness. Um, how do you quantify those kinds of returns? What when you talk to a C-suite member and you say, look, your investment in resilience and preparedness for your company will have a financial return. How do you quantify that?
I think the quantification ultimately, right? The ultimate quantification is share price, reputation, and for us, it has been also the Gallup survey. We know when you do employee survey, it's a very difficult financial quantification to make. And I will just do a parenthesis. When I did my executive MBA, I did one. I was already head of security of a private banker at the time, and my executive MBA thesis was all about KPIs that can demonstrate the return on investment that security function will bring. Right, and in all humility, I had a 6 out of 6 for my thesis. It was brilliant. Day one, I tried to implement my thesis. I realized it was absolutely not working. So I had to throw it in the bin. Why is that? Because all the quantificator I did put at the time were all financial quantificator. And the issue that completely misunderstood is the fear element. When someone feel like the resilience of the company is strong enough for the company to survive, for the employee not to be killed or injured, all of a sudden what happened is you got that employee motivation rising, you got the dedication of the employee increasing, you got the productivity increasing. If you think on the opposite side, if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel secure, if you don't feel resilient, you're going to be kind of getting shyer and shyer, and you're going to hold back and try to do less and less and spend a lot of
Sure.
time in trying to get a new job. And all of a sudden, that productivity reduces. And if you got the sum of the productivity of every single individual that reduced even by marginal point, multiplied by 170,000 people, you got 170,000 point of productivity reduction. I'm an economist by trade, so it's easy for me to think about numbers. But the mistake I made at the time was actually the proper return on investment is initially on making your staff stronger and more resilient. You need to imagine like a spring. Right? The resilience is like a spring. It's the capacity of a company to absorb the shock, but then ultimately to bounce back higher and faster than the others. And that's what makes true resilient. And when you do it the right way, all of a sudden you start to reduce all the controversies. All of a sudden, by reducing the controversies, you become a partner of choice. And your employee all of a sudden wants to join. When I joined Holcim because of the Lafarge, for the readers, Lafarge, or for the listener, Lafarge Holcim merged. Lafarge had massive issue in Syria. They couldn't find a head of security at the time. They got me in. They headhunted me from Rio Tinto. And Jan said, just fix it. Do whatever, fix it. Right? And what I realized is there was 2 of us in the function at the time, 3. I could not hire anyone. No one will join us. No one wanted to join Lafarge. And by creating Lafarge and then Holcim, Lafarge Holcim then became Holcim, more secure, more trustworthy, more resilient. All of a sudden, people were seeing us as an element that they wanted to join. And that's not only my doing, right? It's you on HSC, guys. If you remember on HSC, how many fatalities we had at the time before you and Jeff joined, right? You guys cleaned it. And by cleaning it, all of a sudden people felt compelled to kind of work more with us. And that's how. So the proper measurement, it's a very subtle line, is how do you quantify satisfaction? Gallup survey, very interestingly, have given us a 4.6 out of 5 for the entire end-to-end security and resilience function, which was about 6,000 people. That means people were really proud to work for a function like ours that was somehow directly protecting the people, the environment, the asset, the reputation, and the bottom lines. And in summary, that's what we do as a resilience function. We protect the pearls, people, environment, asset, reputation, legal, and bottom lines against non-financial risks. And
So
by
then
doing this, you make it more resilient.
Yeah, so you make the case that the better your resilience is, the better your reputation, then that's going to translate to stock price, and it's going to attract a better workforce. More people will
Yeah,
want to work with you because you
yeah,
have a better reputation, so on and so forth.
correct. Now, think the opposite way. Would you be keen to work for a company which is killing people, damaging the environment, negating that they're doing anything wrong, being seen as world war criminal, etc., etc., etc.? At some point,
Sure.
people would say no. As an investor, would you invest in a company which ultimately is destroying the humankind, destroying the planet, destroying the nature? Some continent might, but many of the others won't. Right? So I think we need to look at it from the opposite side, which I think the real return on investment on resilience is actually the cost of not having it, which is easier to measure. You know, the global compact list, the UN global compact list, which is a list which is taking reputational rating from agencies, and all of a sudden you got a negative rating as a company, and you blacklisted on the UN side, which was the case of Holcim of Lafarge, sorry, before. We had to clean this. The fact that then all of a sudden investors lose trust in you means every borrowing of cash that you have to do, the borrowing is going to be higher, more expensive. Every time of you apply for a tender and you want to become provider of a national infrastructure, they're going to look at you and the others are going to say, no, we're going to choose the others. So it's the cost of not doing it, which is getting more and more difficult to justify. Heathrow, look at what happened. Airplane going down, not being able to fly for 1 or 2 days. Look at, I think in the US, you got a perfect example, Boeing.
Mm,
Boeing is a perfect example of the cost of not having been resilient enough or too arrogant somehow to accept that it was an issue. And all of a sudden, the small amount of those issues, when they start to accumulate, they become so big that they explode.
sure, and I think that was the 737-800s that there
Yeah, the
were a
max.
few consecutive accidents, and they didn't really seem to take appropriate actions, and then billions and billions of dollars of orders were then canceled by their customers. Is that what you're
Correct.
referring to?
And you look at what's happening at the moment on Jaguar and Range Rover. They've been out of business for the last 2.5 months because of a cyber attack. They didn't take it seriously. They were too arrogant to believe that they're going to be
Mm.
fine. They're out of business. Most of the Swiss shops are currently closing. They're not even selling. They don't even want to sell anymore. Guess who has moved in? And I know it can be very politically kind of weird. Guess who has moved in? BYD. BYD is currently that Chinese brand, which is the competitor to Tesla. And I think somehow they went just above Tesla numbers of cars selling per year. BYD is now listing themselves to take over all the concession of Jaguar, Range Rover in Switzerland. I can't talk about the other market, but I
Wow,
was with a Jaguar reseller recently, and they said, nope, we're not selling anymore. We're moving to BYD.
crazy.
So shall we
So
talk
that's
about the ROI? The ROI is actually not doing it.
so you talk about you're probably the first person that I've ever met who had a C-suite role as a resilience professional, as a security professional. So being, I remember you. I think it was even shortly after I left, but you were recently, up until recently, when you started your own firm,
Yeah,
Group Resilience, which I should say you can find at groupresilience.com. Um, you were the chief resilience officer for Holcim,
correct.
and are you a proponent of companies establishing that level role?
I'm a proponent of company taking resilience seriously. And taking it seriously could mean having it as a job title, could mean having it as a specific stream. I think it depends on the industry you are in. If we take cyber 20 years ago, no one was really taking it seriously. And there's been those long debate on whether or not we should have cybersecurity standing at the board or the executive committee. I think it depends on your industry. I think one will go even a step further. Take what happened to Magali Anderson. She was the global head of HSC at the time, and then she became an EXCO member in charge of HSC. And all of a sudden, as soon as you bring an EXCO member, C-suite, to a level of executive, all of a sudden, the message to the ground is very clear, is we do care about HSC. We do care about resilience. So the short answer is Yes, if they really want to show that they mean it, then empower someone that can build those bridges between functions and make sure that they anticipate, identify, respond, and then learn from the incident. But while they are doing all this, they also need to recover. Because if you're under attack and the recovery doesn't happen, you're going to lose money, a lot of money, but you're never going to be able to go back to where you were before. So there's an absolute need whenever we have to respond to a serious situation. To the HSE, you guys in the HSE world are somehow naturally resilient entity. Why? Because you do everything you can from a bow tie point of view to avoid something to happen. You identify what might happen. When the incident takes place, you got the emergency response team, you got the firefighter, you got the HSE, you got the special hazard guys, you got all the team there to respond. And then you do the investigation. Then you learn, you take that, and you look at it whether or not it's a program issue or it's a specific issue in a country, and then you deploy again. This is exactly the model that aviation has been following for decades. Right?
Yeah.
Is learning from. And believe it or not, but one of the most challenging and somehow dangerous way to travel around the world is not on four wheels, is up in the air. But the amount of fatality that we have in the air versus on the ground is extraordinary. People will stop flying if they know they have the same probability of dying that they will have in driving a car.
Yeah.
So resiliency for me, because you're an HSC expert, it's part of your DNA. What is not part of your DNA as HSC leaders, and that's my answer to your question, is you still need to talk the commercial / the operational / the executive language to make it appealing to them. So yes, promoting people with the right knowledge, but also the right capacity of influencing, and also the right ecosystem in the company in which you are. All team needed that resilience at the time. Not every company will need that resilience. However, every company, this is one of the things that my boutique offer at the moment, is what we call fractioned CSO, or fraction, as you and I have discussed once long ago. You know, you got a fractional head of resilience, a fractional head of security, a fractional CFO, a fractional HSC, because they do know it's important to have someone, and I'm going to quote you on that one. It's important to have someone not around the table 24/7 on the payroll, but someone at phone distance when and if needed, and you pick up the phone and you call them. That's what I think it's needed.
Sure. Having that great, there aren't enough top experts for everybody to have one, but there are ways that you can have access to one, and I think the fractional professional is a growing field. So I think it'd be a great fit for someone to consider. Hey, do we need a chief resilience officer, a head of safety and security? Maybe we need to have access to one. We can build a plan, we can put some things in place, and then we know that we have access to this person when we need it, or on an infrequent basis, as opposed to just kind of like you don't need a lawyer every single day, but you have one on retainer if you're a business owner. Yeah.
I think that's a really good analogy, right? You don't need a lawyer 24/7, but you need to have access to several type of lawyers, from hiring to firing to contract to litigation, and you go in escalation, right?
Yeah, and I worked as a consultant for a company that specialized in emergency response, and one of the things that was critical to those relationships was you needed a relationship with our company before the bad thing happened, because when the bad thing's happening, the last thing you want to do is go looking for resources.
Yeah.
Because one, everyone you talk to is going to say yes, we can do it, and you'll have no time to vet them. So, getting that in place.
I would go even a step further than that. Whenever you find that person, either they're not equipped because the real good one are out and busy, either they're really good and they're going to be 3 or 4 times more expensive. Just to give you an idea of the cost, right? When I get called at last minute, my peers in what we're doing, which is kind of reputational damage management, people are ready to pay anything between $4,000 to $5,000 to $10,000 a day, because they can immediately, to go back to your ROI, they can immediately quantify the money they're losing per hour.
Oh yeah.
If you put those people on retainer, which is also something we're offering, the retainer is anything between 3,000 to 4,000 a month. And those 3,000 or 4,000 a month guarantee 10 to 15 hours of pure support. Well, this is enough. Very often when you have a crisis, it doesn't take more time to align to make sure that the crisis is properly managed or the resilience is properly engineered in design to then avoid that big numbers at the end. But that's another topic. I think we're not getting there. We're getting there in many industries. Take critical infrastructure, take airport, take Facebook or Meta, take Google. How many times have you seen Google or Facebook being down more than a couple of hours? Understanding the complexity that they have because they cannot afford being out of business. You might remember in Austin, we talked about those 6-1, right? We were discussing with the business and saying, guys, what is the cost to you, business, if the IT system is down 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? And they were looking at us and said, well, we don't know. I said, well, you should calculate. And then they said, well, actually, IT will tell me. I said, no. IT will fight to make sure that the system are protected, but then if the system are down, they're going to fight to make them come back online. But they're not going to fight for you to make the money. That's your job. And as soon as the system are back online, you can't expect IT to have uploaded all the data that you've generated during that amount of time of disruption, and then to keep going and making money. And they were challenging, why 1 minute? We don't need 1 minute or 1 second. I said, well, we do have a trading floor. If we lose 1 second of trading, or 1 minute of trading, that's massive. If we lose 1 week of building capacity or cement creation capacity in a cement plant that has already 6 months of stock, that's fine. So we shouldn't do much. But that's 6 times 1 is absolutely critical.
Yeah, in 2015, I worked a ship collision in the Houston Ship Channel, and I was part of the incident command structure as a safety officer. And that ship collision, the hazard was such that it shut down the entire Houston port for 21 days. It was tens of millions of dollars of economic activity that was being blocked from occurring because of the one incident.
Did you say 10 of billion or million?
It was I forget the number to be quite honest, but it was an enormous number when the Coast Guard port captain told us what the economic impact was.
The reason I'm saying this, Dan, is million, billion, those are massive numbers, right? And we tend at our level, your level, my level, we got a house, we got a family, we got a car, 1 million, 10 billion, those are just extraordinary numbers. If you think about the impact, for example, in Genova, Genova, that's Italian city, where the bridge collapsed, they were losing the equivalent of 5 to 10 million a day of economy. Why? Because it's not the first, second, but also the third and fourth level which are impacted. Starting from the worker not being able to go to work, starting from the normal goods not being able to be brought to the supermarket, and therefore supermarket not being able to sell. And if they sell, they need to bring in goods from another place, which is going to be more expensive, etc. So the consequences are usually in billions of dollars. Yeah. Which no one will absorb, and that's a value creation which is gone. You can't just regenerate billions of dollars in a couple of weeks or months. That the money is gone.
Yeah, and it's a lost opportunity too, right?
It is.
You don't make it back up. You just start when you can start, and you've lost that period.
It is, and if you play it well, allow me an analogy. I know in the US you talk about soccer, and in Europe we talk about football. We don't see that, but I'm 190. I'm about 110 kilos. I'm kind of big guy, quite, and I was a goalkeeper. I'm too fat, too lazy to become a striker. So they ended up by putting me in goal. Good. I got big hands. And for me, the philosophy of resilience is like being a goalkeeper. Why? The goalkeeper, the real strength of the goalkeeper is not to stop. That's tactical goalkeeping. If you're really, and that's tactical HSE, right? Avoiding that injuries, the triangle: injuries, fatalities, multiple fatalities. blocking the ball, it's the job of the goalkeeper. The real job is to teach the first line, the second line, and the third line of defense to avoid the goal to come in. But when you start to become a master as a goalkeeper, and there's Luigi Buffon, which was the goalkeeper of Italy, stopped playing at age 40 something, 44. He was so good that he became captain of the team. Why? Because he was able to teach the striker how to strike on the other side. He was able to teach the strikers how to move around the defense and spotted the issue on the other side. Because when you are backwards and you look and you have time to think, you're actually paid to think, and you think well, you can create a competitive advantage for your own company to beat the competition when adversity will hit. Because adversity will hit. Whatever you do, it will hit. The question is how fast and how strong and how stronger you can come out from those kind of adversity. And that's for me the 101 resilience return on investment.
Right. And as we've touched on a number of these points, but I think in 2025 you put out a model that talked about a number of them. We have a lot of different types of risks that companies are exposed to. So you mentioned cyber attacks. Of course, there's geopolitical, right? We've gone through this Ukraine Russia thing for a while now, and other conflicts around the world. We're looking at one between Venezuela and the United States right now. Supply chains, right? We saw from the COVID, there were massive supply chain disruptions, and the way companies used to work suddenly was massively disrupted. That leads to cascading interruptions. And then you mentioned climate and those 5 converging risks. What do you tell organizations about how they need to react or plan for and assess and model for these kinds of incidents and how they interact with each other? What do you tell them about the interconnectedness of these kinds of risks?
So there's an African sentence which says, "You do not eat an elephant in one go; you slice it." Those interconnectivity between threats are just making the individual response more complicated, because all of a sudden, instead of having, if you remember 10, 15 years ago, you had one conflict, you had one issue, you had one, but every time we had one and then we had time to recover and relearn and then move to another one. At the moment, they're just all happening together. And I think the summary is there's 2 types of incident. There's only 2 types, the man-made and the non-man-made. Now, the third one's going to be at some point the machine-made one, which would that be considered as part of act of God? Most likely not. Is it considered as human-made somehow because it's made by human? But at some point we're going to lose momentum. We're going to lose control of those machines. And funny enough, I am currently working on what we call the Q day, which is quantum day, the day in which quantum computing will be a reality. In which case, then all of a sudden, all the firewalls that we know, all the security that we know, are going to be gone. History. So we will need to prepare for that. Now, to your point, I think the important is about awareness. You do not cross the road on an highway for a reason. We do not have crossing with red light on an highway, because if you start to do that, that's not an highway. And if you try to cross, there's so many variables, the speed, the aerodynamic, the fact that you can be blown, that you will die most likely. So what you need to do is improve your awareness and understanding the threats, not the risk, the threats that your company is exposed to. I know in the financial world or in the economic world, the threat is about actually the risk is an element of if you think about the logic of threat versus risk, they look at the risk and they say intent opportunity. Basically, you can measure the threat and the risk in a way that you can get out and say, as an American, you would say, well, every single risk has an opportunity that I can work on. In that world where you do not control the threats, you and I do not control, even the biggest, the most powerful CEO in the world will not control what's happening in Venezuela. He will not control the current hurricane they got in Jamaica. He does not, or she does not.
Sure.
So what you can do, however, is control the threat environment, or at least understand the threat environment, which is intent, capability, and opportunity. What could be thrown at us operating in that ecosystem? Then you take it and you say, all right, what is the likelihood and the consequence of that happening to me, my employees, my company. Once you have that understanding, terrorism activity, for example, very big topic in many countries, was the terrorism threat level for the UK, can be really high. But if you're in a house, or if you got a jewelry, or you do a bit of supply chain on the north of London, which is far away from Westminster, the likelihood that you're going to be directly impacted by terrorist activity is very, very low. However, the likelihood that you're going to be disrupted because you can't travel to London, because they're going to shut down the airport, because people will be frightened, is higher and higher. So what we say is, guys, split the threat, understand which one you're exposed to. Then you take that threat, you measure it in risk, proper risk, likelihood, consequence, but then you manage them. Just don't do assessment. You managed.
Yeah.
Once you manage them, it gives you only what they call the 4T, but we created the 50. The 4Ts historically are you treat, you tolerate, you terminate, you transfer. Those are the 4T. The fifth one we created, and I think that's the summary of what resilience is about, is you transform. You transform a specific threat and a specific risk into a competitive advantage. And that's how you can talk to CEOs, CFOs, you put the right wording at the right place for the right people, and you just adapt. It's like if I start to talk to you in Italian, that's not going to help. The communication might stop, right? So it's all about finding that communication level that will be understood by both parties.
You bring up the idea of risk management, or your ability to be resilient in the face of risk as a competitive advantage.
Yes.
There is I can't remember the guy's first name. His last name's Drucker, but I think one of his famous business sayings was, all profit is derived from risk. And you look at that, and it's not like taking advantage of an incident in order to make profit, but it's saying, if I'm a company that is able to, let's say in my business currently with laboratory analysis, if I have a customer who primarily responds to emergency responses, their biggest need from me is quick turn, as well as good analytical. You can get good analytical from lots of different labs, but you can't get quick turn on results from all, from that many labs. And so specializing on addressing that risk of that's out there, of what does this customer need, what is the risk that they're faced with that they need to address, things quickly. If I become quick in response, now I'm the preferred vendor for that customer type.
Correct. So for example, there's one and I'm conscious of time, because then you and I, with the amount of work we've done together, I remember we can
forever.
Yeah. And I'm sure the audience at some point will be all right. Can we wrap up? But there's the Bureau Veritas, the company you work for, have an extraordinary capacity to measure, to certify, etc. And what I do as a business is I create maturity models that allows us to say whether or not a company is mature enough against a specific type of threat / risk in the environment in which they operate. There's no reason why we should be earthquake proof in a country which has almost zero probability of earthquake. There's no reason why we should have, with all due respect, with what's happening in the US, but strong procedures of active shooting in Europe, because that's not the daily issue, while it is in the US. So it is very important that the maturity is aligned on the current threat and risk environment that the companies faced. And one thing I've been trying for now a couple of months, is how do we connect insurance, maturity models, and company like Bureau Veritas or SGS, but those competitors, Bureau Veritas, I kind of switch when it comes to certain type of models, because you think differently, the two of you, obviously. But how can we leverage your own expertise, the insurance expertise and the maturity expertise to then say to the investors, you know what, that specific company has the right maturity to anticipate, respond, recover, and learn from those specific threats. And guess what? As soon as you say that, investors are much more keen to invest. So that's the way the circle works. That's how what I call, and this is my logo, right? My logo has an infinite sign on it because that's an infinite element where you move from, well, the risks are fast changing, they're all changing constantly. You can't just say, you know what, yeah, it's going to be all right. 6 months going to be this year. Nah, it's not going to disappear in 6 months. Something else will come. So you need to create that kind of momentum. And I met someone who told me it's called the quantum momentum. The quantum momentum where your spring goes up and down all the time and helps you to prepare for this one, but also prepare the next one, get ready. Now, it has to be done with efficiency because one cannot, sorry, one cannot spend his entire life or entire life thinking about the worst. It's impossible. Because otherwise, to go back to my analogy of the goalkeeping, you put all the team in within the goal and then you wait. It doesn't work like this. You still need to make money. So you need to empower the lines. Sorry?
You got to play the game at some point.
You need to score. You need to take risks to score.
Right.
But you need to use that learning and that knowledge to bring it to the first line of attack, the strikers. And they need to know that when they're about to lose, they have to come back in defense and help, because then they know that the defense can block and then throw them again. And that's all the movement, the quantum moment, that where basically we are always swinging, like adapting constantly.
So your group Resilience has a couple of models for addressing risk maturity, and I think that there's a lot that companies could learn from looking at those models and engaging with you guys and seeing where they can improve and where they can rise to a higher level of maturity.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? Is LinkedIn the best place to contact you?
Well, we got groupresilience.com.
Groupresilience.com. Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, LinkedIn. But there's one thing I need to say. When I do maturity, when my team and my company does maturity, we always refuse to implement the mitigations. I am extremely tired and exhausted of those consultancy firms coming and telling us there's a problem, we have the solution. No, that's completely biased. What we do is we come in, and you've seen me in Osim. I go in, I find a problem, and then I split it in pieces and I give it to internal people to fix it. And we usually then create a team of people to fix it, right? So it's all about making sure that as a group resilience, when we come in, we do an absolute neutral assessment, fair, neutral, but holistic, and somehow very, very factual of what's happening. And then what we do is we step in to then help them to find the right supplier, not my trusted supplier, the right suppliers to then mitigate the problem. Now, we basically have 4 lines of service. We are the search, either we advise, either we fix and solve, either we measure. Whenever we measure, we don't advise, we don't search, and we don't fix. That's the DNA. We do not do this, because every time I was doing that with people, they were naturally looking at then, well, my company website says I'm doing this, and therefore I'm going to find only the problem that on my company website solution. That doesn't make sense. That's wrong. So we've created those kind of 4 pillars, and the way we support companies is either by embedding someone in within the company, which is what we call the fractional. We do have also membership where not everyone can afford to have access to subject matter experts. So we have some specific retainers. But then ultimately, there's one thing that we do a lot is we do mentoring. We do mentoring for people at a certain level for them to go a level above. How can we help them? How can we help the organization to become smarter somehow? But I have to say, we only do non-financial risk. And I would like to use, I remember I told you that Springer. We used the Springard logic. Springard logic, those are the 10 specific threats that we are specialized in. It's everything which is social, political. Then it's reputational. It's internal, because we do know that employees very often are the source of the problem. Natural, governmental, regulatory. I think the current president of the US has shown that the regulatory system is something that we can't just take for granted. Then we have natural, and I make a big difference between environmental and natural. Environmental is something we create, we generate, we destroy the environment. When natural is something which is thrown at us, right? And then you got the logic of energy. The last one is energy. And then you got the D for, which is for digital, because it's not cyber. We don't do cyber. I think the cyber response, as a former CISO, I can't argue that I'm strong in cyber anymore, but I can argue that we've learned, as I said before, we've learned how to make the business back into their own feet and making profit whenever they've been hit. So that's the logic, and it's currently working really well. And I was talking to a gentleman yesterday and said, you really entered the business at the right time, because at the moment we just don't know how to read. And I like the logic, that kind of I think the light tower is called in English, right? The light tower.
Yeah.
I'm one of my dreams for my 50th is, or my gift that I've asked my family, I want to spend a couple of days on a light tower during a storm. And I want to see the light tower with the light helping the ships to navigate and get to safety, bringing the people to safety, bringing the good and the merchandise they have on board to destinations that can still make money. And when there's no storm anymore, the light tower is still there because it still gives you a direction. And that's what drives me massively.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I love the lighthouse in the storm analogy, and I liked when I was doing the research on your boutique firm and seeing the Springard model. It was really interesting to look at. So I'd encourage people to go and just check it out, because you've got it all spelled out on there, and gives you an idea of what the various components are, and how you're going to approach looking at their risks. And so I think it's really cool what you're doing, and it's super great to connect with you again. It's been great talking to you the last few weeks, and I hope it continues. So I wish you all the best.
Anytime, Dan. Anytime, right? First of all, if you're coming to Switzerland, let me know. But also, if with Bureau Veritas we can do something in relation to bringing to your client a sense of good maturity and the right certification, because we don't do certification, people like you would do. You're the best in that environment, and we need to. One thing I've learned, I think today is a perfect example. We should leave to the expert their expertise. Don't ask me to do what you've been doing with me. That would not work. I would most likely cut the speaker too much, and I would speak too much. But secondly, I think it's important to realize that the lukewarm water has already been invented. Let's not reinvent it again. Let's learn from the best, and let's use the best, and let's accept that with humility that we're not perfect, but there's some people who are better than us. And that's I think the entire motto of what we do, is finding the right people to help at the right place to bring the right maturity.
Love it. Love it. Love what you're doing. Keep doing it, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, Dan. Great talking to you.
Bye-bye. The Analyte Podcast has been brought to you by Bureau Veritas, a world leader in testing, inspection, and certification services. Bureau Veritas has been a leading provider of industrial hygiene analytical services in North America for more than 60 years. Join us next time. I'm your host, Dan Christensen.